What exactly is happening in the Kursk region as we enter the third week of the invasion? This morning, BILD journalist Julian Röpcke reported that after the destruction of all the bridges over the same river, the Russian forces in the Glushkovo district are in a dire situation. Nearly 3,000 Russian soldiers, as I mentioned earlier, could find themselves encircled as their supply routes and possibly their escape routes have been cut off. According to the BILD journalist, the Ukrainian forces are reportedly just 5 kilometers away from closing this encirclement. At the same time, the sole representative of the Russian Ministry of Defense, commenting on the Ukrainian advance, stated, first on national television and then to Chinese war correspondents who had come to interview him, that everything is under control. The Ukrainian offensive has already been halted and that the war, or as he calls it, the special military operation, is nearing its end, with just a few months to go.
Оцениваете это Курск направление долго или скоро? Какое время будет?
Я думаю, что в ближайшие 2-3 месяца это полностью все завершится, и причем завершится не только на Курском направлении, а полностью все СВО.
Спасибо вам большое. Спасибо. Спасибо.
Well, what a wonderful union. We are joined now by Julian Röpcke, military analyst and senior editor of the German publication BILD. It's a pleasure to see you as always, Julian. Welcome.
Thank you.
You've been writing in your newspaper about the situation in the Glushkovo district. Could you tell us what's happening at the moment, at the time of this broadcast? How serious is the situation for the Russian army?
Well, as you know, the Ukrainian army started their offensive 2 weeks ago into Sucha district, and right west of it we have Glushkovo district, which is mostly still held by the Russian army right now, but where the Russian army is in quite a, I would say, complicated situation. We have on the south, of course, the Ukrainian border with border forces on the Russian side, border forces on the Ukrainian side. But we also have since 2 weeks on the eastern side, the Ukrainian army slowly advancing south of Koronovo. So they are slowly advancing west. And this is also, I think, admitted by the Russian army, at least by those I understood, that they are saying that there is little more villages being taken. Then we have had the situation that just north of Jotkino, we had the Russian army withdrawing to the right side from the map, the right side of the river Seim. So one village there was voluntarily abandoned, and it is right now occupied by Ukrainian forces. And then last but not least, we have the river Seim with all 3 bridges over it, which are leading to the rest of Kursk Oblast, being destroyed by the Ukrainian army. And we have seen lots of efforts by the Russian pioneer troops over the last days to build pontoon bridges there. But we are all in the age of digitalization, so we have seen very, very updated satellite images from Planet Labs and others. And we know that these pontoon bridges have already been destroyed, although they have been just erected over the past couple of days. And we now also know that the Ukrainian army is very, very active with FPV kamikaze drones, 13 kilometers inside Kursk Oblast, just over the river Seim, and is attacking every pioneer unit from the Russian army, trying to reconnect the rest of Kursk Oblast to Glushkovo район.
Ну вот мне конкретно интересна судьба до 3000 солдат.
I'm particularly interested in the fate of the nearly 3,000 soldiers you mentioned in your article, Julian. How realistic is it that this encirclement could soon be completed, in your view and based on your information? And what outcome can we currently predict for the Russian troops?
I think there we have to differentiate a little bit and just to distinguish between 2 things. First, what we wrote and what I said is that there are 3,000 Russian soldiers in this area, which is being cut off from the north, attacked from the east, from the west, and in the south with the Ukrainian border. This does not mean that these 3,000 soldiers, and we are having estimates there, it's 1,000 in Chotkino, 1,000 in Glushkovo area, and 1,000 along the border in the south. So each of them one polk, one sort of polk, not really. So 3,000 altogether. They are in this area, in these 700 square kilometers, which are sort of being encircled and which are being in a sort of cauldron right now. Of course, they can swim, they can take little boats to get out of it every time they want. But it's very important, I think, to see that this does not automatically mean that these soldiers will be defeated. It does not mean that they will be taken prisoner. because we don't know how many soldiers and how many effort the Ukrainian army will take to attack this area. Right now, we are seeing still the attacks on Kurnovo, and I think this is the first main object for the Ukrainian army. If they take Kurnovo, this will be a big blow to the Russian army, because this will not be a surprise defeat after 2 days like in Sucha, but this will be after more than 2 weeks and being prepared and reinforcing the area. And still, we have seen this morning that Kurnovo, there's a town, and just beside it, there's a village with the same name. And the Ukrainians already took this village and are 1 kilometer away from Kurnovo. So I think this is the first aim. If they take Kurnovo, they can move further south. They can move to a Glushkovo area. So far, we have not seen this. We have not seen Tyorkino being directly attacked from the south, the border, 30 kilometers line border in Glushkovo rayon to Ukraine. It hasn't been attacked so far. So it's, I think, very important to mention that Ukraine is building the conditions of closing a cordon. They are closing the different areas. They are making it very difficult for the Russians to evacuate and also to supply their troops there, but they're not attacking so far. They are only going very slowly from the east, and we don't know where this ends, if this will end south of Kurnovo, or if they will try to push forward Glushkovo and Tyorkino and so on.
We're seeing that the pace of the Ukrainian offensive is slowing down, but there still seems to be potential for further advances. Julian, what does that potential look like? What objectives could the current group achieve in the most optimistic scenario for Kyiv?
Well, I think the most optimistic scenario would be, as President Zelensky just said, to have a security corridor, a buffer zone. And this is ironically a word Mr. Putin used some months ago when he attacked Kursk Oblast. Then he said, it's not about Kharkiv. I don't want Ukraine there. I didn't even annex this. This is just about having a buffer zone. So I think it's quite ironic and also quite smart from the wording from the Ukrainian side to say, well, you are building a buffer zone in our country, we're building a buffer zone in your country. So this, of course, would be the most optimistic outcome there, to have an area of, let's say, 20 kilometers deep into Russia, around Sumy Oblast being occupied by Ukrainian forces. Because in this case, there wouldn't be no more barrel artillery, so Grad missiles and so on, which could be fired on Ukraine directly. They would be fired on Russian territory, then occupied by Ukraine. So this would be a very optimistic scenario for the Ukrainian army. But again, I'm not saying this is going to happen, because what I'm seeing over the past days is that the Russian army is getting more and more glide bombs into the area, FAB 250, FAB 500, and we have even seen allegedly the use of FAB 3000 bombs. And this is something new. We haven't seen this over the first weeks because the Russians were afraid that there was very advanced air defense in the area, in Sumy area. We have seen the Tunguska there and the Buk being hit by the Russian army before. So they seem to be more, more convinced now that the Ukrainians are not as strong as they say when it comes to air defense in this area. And now they are again attacking with Su-34 and other planes. And we have seen, unfortunately, in the east of Ukraine and also in Zaporizhzhia, that when the Russians can move around with their air force freely, it's almost impossible for the Ukrainians to advance. So we will see how this plays out. You're right, Ukraine has more potential to move forward, but the movements have been slowed down. I think this is no question. And the question is if we are seeing a new frontier, a new trench battle starting in Kursk Oblast, or if we continue to see a dynamic situation where the Ukrainian army keeps moving into the directions of its strategic operation.
But this buffer zone and the clear gains made by the Ukrainian forces that we're seeing now, could these factors help restart negotiations with Russia? What are your thoughts on this prospect? Do you agree that this essentially raises the stakes and strengthens Ukraine's negotiating position?
I think, yes, of course, with every square kilometer Ukraine conquers in Russia, it's improving its negotiating position. We haven't seen these negotiations so far. The Kremlin is denying they are taking place at all. But I think in the case of Donald Trump winning the next election, and this is a high possibility, I mean, it's 50% plus minus something, he will look for a deal. And a deal always means, of course, a land swap deal in this area. It has been said before when Ukraine had nothing in Russia, it had said that Ukraine has to give up this and get security guarantees in return. Right now, they are in a position to say, we give up this, but we get this. And I think Russia doesn't want to give any Kursk Oblast area away. So I think Russia will invest a lot over the coming months to conquer Kursk Oblast. And we will see really how this plays out.
The last thing I'd like to ask you about is the situation within Ukraine itself. Contrary to expectation, Russia hasn't moved all its reserves to defend the Kursk region. Instead, they've increased pressure in the Pokrovsk and Toretsk directions in Donetsk. Could they achieve any significant success there?
Yes, I fear that this was a miscalculation by the Ukrainian army, at least so far. Today, we have heard that President Putin gave until October to reconquer Kursk. This was reported by Russian media. I don't know if it's true. If it's true, then maybe he has to move more troops there. Maybe he has to also ease pressure in other fronts. So far, what we have seen, and this is confirmed by sources from all sides, it is that Ukraine has been moving one of its best, one of its most battle-proven troops from Donetsk Oblast to Sumy Oblast and then further to Kursk. We are not seeing the Russian offensive slowing down in the Pokrovsk direction, also not in the Chasiv Yar direction, also not south in the Vuhledar direction. I have to say that the order yesterday of evacuating 65,000 inhabitants, up to 65,000 inhabitants from Pokrovsk, it has been, I mean, this is a strong blow for the Ukrainian government, which said that we can ease pressure in Donetsk if we attack Russia. I think that's something which really didn't play out so far today. I have not seen the Russian offensive slowing down in Donetsk. On the other hand, we have seen that the Ukrainian defense is getting thinner in Pokrovsk.
We'll be watching this closely. Thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to see you and hear your insights. That was Julian Röpcke, military analyst and senior editor of the German publication BILD.